I moved in with my in-laws after my husband left. Then his brother proposed to me. My name is Janelle, I'm 32, and this is how things got complicated. I was folding laundry in the guest room when Claire knocked on the door frame. "Honey, dinner's ready," she said, her voice carrying that gentle tone she'd adopted since I moved in 3 months ago. The same tone you'd use with a wounded animal. "Coming," I replied, setting down one of David's old t-shirts that somehow still lived in this house despite him being gone. Claire lingered in the doorway, watching me with those concerned eyes that made me feel both grateful and suffocated. "You know you don't have to do the laundry," she said for the 100th time. "I need to stay busy." It was true. The alternative was sitting in this room, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my marriage had crumbled so completely that I'd ended up back where David and I used to visit for Sunday dinners. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled like Claire's famous pot roast, the same recipe she'd made every Sunday for 25 years. Robert sat at the head of the table, reading something on his phone while waiting for us. At 48, he still looked like an older version of David, same dark hair and broad shoulders, though Robert's eyes held a steadiness that David had never quite mastered. "Smells incredible, Mom," I said, taking my usual seat. The same seat I'd occupied as David's wife, now as their displaced daughter-in-law who had nowhere else to go. Claire beamed, but I caught the quick glance she exchanged with Robert. They'd been having those silent conversations more frequently lately, the kind that made my stomach twist with anxiety. Were they getting tired of me? Was I overstaying my welcome? "Any word from the lawyers today?" Robert asked, cutting into his meat with surgical precision. I shook my head. "David's being difficult about the house. He wants to sell it, but I can't afford to buy him out, and I can't afford to find somewhere else either." The words tasted bitter. 6 months ago, I'd been planning our 5th anniversary trip to Italy. Now I was discussing my financial ruin over dinner with his parents. "That boy never did think things through," Claire muttered, her disapproval of her own son's behavior clear in her voice. But Robert's reaction surprised me. His jaw tightened, and he set down his fork with more force than necessary. "He's being vindictive. This isn't about money for him." There was something in his tone that made me look up sharply. Robert rarely spoke ill of David, even now. But the way he said vindictive carried a weight that suggested he knew more than he was letting on. After dinner, I retreated to the back porch with a cup of tea, needing space to breathe. The October air was crisp, and the leaves on the old oak tree were just beginning to turn. This had always been my favorite spot in their house, peaceful, removed from the chaos of daily life. I was scrolling through job listings on my phone when the porch door opened. Robert stepped out, carrying 2 glasses of wine. "Thought you might need this more than tea," he said, offering me one. "I shouldn't. I have that interview tomorrow. 1 glass won't hurt." He settled into the chair beside me, and I noticed how the porch light caught the silver threading through his hair. "Besides, you need to relax. You've been wound tight as a spring lately." I accepted the wine, grateful for his thoughtfulness. Robert had always been the steady one in the family, the one who fixed things when they broke, who listened when you needed to talk. It's why David had always felt inadequate next to him, though Robert never seemed to realize it. "Can I ask you something?" The wine was already loosening my tongue. "Shoot." "That day David left, you weren't surprised, were you?" Robert was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, measured. I knew he was struggling with something. I just didn't know what. But there was more to it than that. I could see it in the way he avoided my eyes, in the tension that crept into his shoulders. "Robert, what aren't you telling me?" He took a long sip of his wine, then set the glass down on the small table between us. "Some things are better left buried, Janelle." The way he said my name, soft and deliberate, sent an unexpected shiver through me. It was different from how David used to say it, rushed and distracted. Robert made it sound important. "I think I have a right to know," I pressed. "Whatever it was that made him run away from our marriage, from me, I need to understand it." "Do you? Or do you just think you do?" He turned to face me fully, and in the dim light, his expression was unreadable. Sometimes understanding doesn't help. Sometimes it just makes the hurt worse. The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with something I couldn't quite name. I found myself studying his face, noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. The way his eyes were actually more green than brown, the small scar above his left eyebrow from some childhood accident. "You're probably right," I said finally, though every instinct I had was screaming that he was hiding something significant. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sound of crickets filling the space between us. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in our conversation, like a door had been cracked open just enough to let in a sliver of light. "Janelle?" Robert's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Yeah. Whatever happens with the divorce, with the house, with everything, you're not alone in this. You know that, right?" The sincerity in his voice nearly broke me. I'd been holding myself together through sheer willpower for months, but the kindness in his words threatened to unravel every careful defense I'd built. "Thank you," I whispered, not trusting my voice to hold steady. When I looked at him, he was already watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. For a moment, neither of us moved, and I had the strangest sensation that we were balanced on the edge of something irreversible. Then Claire's voice called from inside, "Robert, can you help me with this jar?" And the spell was broken. He stood quickly, almost knocking over his wine glass. I should go help her. Of course. But as he reached the door, I called out, "Robert." He turned back, his hand on the door handle. "What you said about David struggling with something, when did you first notice it?" His pause lasted just a beat too long. "Around Christmas last year." But Christmas was when things had still been good between David and me. We'd hosted his whole family, and David had seemed happy, relaxed even. If he'd been struggling with something then, he'd hidden it well. Unless Robert was talking about something else entirely. The next morning's interview went better than I'd expected. The marketing firm seemed genuinely interested in my background, and the salary they mentioned would be enough to get me back on my feet, maybe even enough to keep the house if David would be reasonable about the buyout. I was practically floating when I walked back into Claire and Robert's house, ready to share the good news. But the moment I stepped through the front door, I knew something was wrong. The house felt different, charged with an energy that made my skin prickle. Claire was in the kitchen, furiously scrubbing dishes that already looked clean. She looked up when I entered, and her smile seemed forced. "How did it go, honey?" "Really well, actually. I think I might get an offer." But my excitement dimmed as I took in her agitated state. "Is everything okay?" "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" Her laugh was too bright, too quick. "Where's Robert?" "He had to run some errands." She turned back to the dishes, scrubbing with renewed vigor. But Robert's truck was still in the driveway. I'd seen it when I pulled up. "Claire, what's going on?" She set down the dish she'd been washing and turned to face me fully. For a moment, I thought she was going to tell me the truth. Instead, she said, "David called." My stomach dropped. What did he want? "He's coming by tomorrow to pick up some things. I thought you should know in case you want to make arrangements to be elsewhere." The way she said it made it clear that this wasn't just about avoiding an awkward encounter. There was something else, something that made her think I needed to be warned. Did he say what things? No, just that he had some belongings in the basement he needed to collect. But David had taken everything that mattered to him when he left. What could possibly be in the basement that was worth a special trip? I excused myself and went upstairs, but instead of going to my room, I found myself standing outside Robert's study. The door was closed, but I could hear him inside, talking on the phone in the low, urgent tones people use when they don't want to be overheard. I pressed my ear to the door, feeling guilty, but unable to stop myself. "Can't let her find out like this," he was saying. "She's been through enough." "No, I don't care what you think is best. This is my decision to make." There was a long pause then. "Tomorrow changes everything. After tomorrow, there won't be any choice but to tell her the truth." My blood ran cold. Whatever secret Robert had been keeping, whatever had really driven David away, it was about to come out. And from the sound of his voice, it was going to devastate me. I crept back to my room and closed the door, my mind racing. What truth? What was happening tomorrow that would change everything? David's visit, It had to be connected to David's visit. I spent the rest of the evening in a state of anxious anticipation, jumping at every sound, studying Claire and Robert's faces for clues. But they were both acting perfectly normal now, as if whatever crisis had occurred earlier had been resolved. At dinner, Robert even seemed more relaxed than usual, telling stories about his day at the construction site that made Claire laugh. But I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking, his expression troubled and somehow apologetic. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, turning over every conversation I'd had with Robert, every interaction with David in the months before he left, every strange look or comment that might have hinted at whatever bombshell was coming. By morning, I was exhausted and on edge. Claire made pancakes, David's favorite, which seemed like either a cruel coincidence or a deliberate choice. Robert ate quickly and left for work early, claiming he had an important meeting. "You don't have to be here when he comes," Claire said as she cleared the breakfast dishes. "In fact, it might be better if you weren't."
Why?
"What's he going to find in that basement that's so earth-shattering?" Claire's hands stilled on the plate she was holding. "I don't know what you mean. I heard Robert on the phone yesterday. He said tomorrow would change everything, that after tomorrow there wouldn't be any choice but to tell me the truth." "What truth, Claire?" She set the plate down carefully, her back still to me. When she turned around, her face was pale but resigned. "Sit down, honey. I'd rather stand." "Janelle, please. This is hard enough as it is." I sat, my heart hammering against my ribs. Claire took the chair across from me, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "What I'm about to tell you, it's going to hurt. And I want you to know that Robert and we never wanted you to find out this way. We were hoping. Just tell me." She took a shaky breath. "David didn't leave because he fell out of love with you. He left because he was in love with someone else." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though part of me had suspected. "Who?" Claire's eyes filled with tears. "His secretary, Amanda. They'd been having an affair for almost a year." The betrayal was crushing, but it wasn't the earth-shattering revelation I'd been expecting. Plenty of marriages ended in infidelity. People survived it, moved on, rebuilt their lives. So, why did Robert think this would change everything? "There's more, isn't there?" I said quietly. Claire nodded miserably. "She's pregnant. The baby is due in December." Now I understood. David hadn't just cheated on me. He'd started a whole new family while I was still planning our anniversary trip. But still, devastating as it was, I couldn't see why Robert had sounded so urgent on the phone. "What's in the basement, Claire?" She looked confused. I don't know. He just said he needed to get some things." Then why was Robert so worried about me finding out the truth after today? I mean, this is awful, but it's not exactly. The front door opened, cutting off my words. David's voice carried through the house. "Mom? I'm here for those boxes." My whole body went rigid. I wasn't ready for this. Wasn't prepared to see him knowing what I now knew. But before I could move, he was walking into the kitchen, looking exactly the same as the day he'd walked out of our marriage except for a glow of contentment that made me want to scream. "Janelle." His voice was carefully neutral. "I didn't know you'd be here. I live here now, remember? Since you decided our house was too small for both of us." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Look, I don't want this to be difficult. I just need to grab a few things from the basement, and then I'll be out of your hair." "What things?" The question came out sharper than I'd intended. "Just some old photo albums. Family stuff. Nothing that matters to you." But his eyes flickered when he said it, and I knew he was lying. David had never been good at deception. It was one of the things I'd loved about him. Or thought I'd loved about him. "I'll come with you," I said, standing up. "That's really not necessary. I insist." The basement was exactly as I remembered from previous visits. Half storage space, half Robert's workshop. David headed straight for a corner where several boxes were stacked, but his movements seemed nervous, hurried. I watched as he opened the first box, revealing what did indeed appear to be photo albums. But when he lifted them out, I caught a glimpse of something underneath that made my breath catch. Legal documents. And from what I could see, they looked like they had my name on them. David, what are those papers? Nothing. Just old tax stuff. But he was already shoving them back into the box, his face flushed with guilt. Let me see them. Janelle, please, just let me finish here and go. But I was already moving toward the box, and David's obvious panic only made me more determined. When I reached for the papers, he tried to pull the box away, and in the resulting struggle, the contents spilled across the concrete floor. What I saw made the room spin around me. Divorce papers. But not ours. These were dated from 2 years ago, and they were between David and someone named Lisa Chen. Papers that showed David had been married before, had gotten divorced, and had never told me about any of it. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the custody agreement underneath, outlining visitation rights for a child named Sophie Chen Morrison. A child who was currently 6 years old. David had a daughter. A daughter he'd never mentioned, never acknowledged, never even hinted at in 5 years of marriage. You have a child. The words came out as barely a whisper. David closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging in defeat. Yes. A 6-year-old daughter that you've been hiding from me for our entire marriage. It's complicated. Complicated? My voice was rising now, echoing off the basement walls. You have a child, David. A little girl who's your daughter, and you never told me. She doesn't live here. Lisa moved to Portland after the divorce. I barely see her. That doesn't matter. That's not the point. I was shouting now, years of suppressed anger and confusion finally finding an outlet. How could you not tell me? How could you marry me and not mention that you have a daughter? Because I knew you'd react like this. Like what? Like someone who's been lied to for 5 years? Like someone who deserved to know that the man she married already had a family? David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing but now just irritated me. I didn't want it to complicate things. Lisa and we were toxic together. The whole situation was a mess, and I just wanted to start fresh with you. Start fresh by lying to me. By not dragging you into something that had nothing to do with us. It had everything to do with us. She's your daughter, David. And what about Amanda? Does she know about Sophie? His silence was answer enough. Oh my God, you're doing it again. You're starting another family while hiding the previous one. The magnitude of his deception was staggering. Does Sophie know about me? Does she know her father has been married to someone else for the past 5 years? She thinks I'm single, he admitted quietly. I stared at him. This man I thought I knew. This man I'd built a life with, and realized I'd never known him at all. He wasn't just unfaithful, he was a serial compartmentalizer, someone who created separate worlds and never let them touch. Get out, I said, my voice deadly calm now. Janelle. Get out of this house. Take your boxes and your secrets and get out. He gathered up the scattered papers with shaking hands, shoving them back into the box. I never meant for you to find out like this. When did you mean for me to find out? Never? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. After he left, I sat on the basement steps for a long time, trying to process what I'd learned. Not just about the affair or the pregnancy, but about the fundamental dishonesty that had shaped our entire relationship. How many other secrets were there? How many other compartments in David's life had I never been allowed to see? When I finally went back upstairs, Claire was waiting in the kitchen with a cup of tea and red-rimmed eyes. I'm so sorry, honey. We should have told you about Sophie years ago, but David begged us not to, and we thought it wasn't our place. How long have you known? Since before he married you. Robert wanted to tell you then, but David threatened to cut us out of his life if we did. He said it would ruin everything between you two. So Robert's known all along. Something clicked into place. That's why he's been so angry at David. Not just about the affair, but about all of the lies. Claire nodded. Robert's always believed that honesty is the foundation of any relationship. David's deception, it's been eating at him for years. I thought about all those conversations with Robert, all those moments when I'd sensed he was holding something back. He'd been carrying David's secrets, protecting me from a truth that would have changed everything. Where is he now? Still at work, I think. He said he might be late tonight. But I needed to see him, needed to talk to someone who understood the full scope of what David had done. More than that, I needed to see Robert, the man who'd been studying me through the worst months of my life while carrying the weight of his son's lies. I found him at the construction site downtown, standing in what would eventually be the lobby of a new office building. He was talking to one of his workers, pointing at something on a blueprint, but when he saw me walking across the construction zone, his face immediately shifted to concern. "Janelle, what are you doing here?" "David came by today." Robert's expression darkened.
Ah,
"So you know. About Sophie?"
yes.
"About the affair and the pregnancy, too." I stepped closer, having to raise my voice slightly over the sound of machinery. "Robert, why didn't you tell me?" He was quiet for a moment, his jaw working as he considered his words. Finally, he said, "Can we talk somewhere quieter?" He led me to his truck, and we drove in silence to a small park a few blocks away. The afternoon sun was filtering through the trees, creating patterns of golden light on the ground, but I barely noticed. All my attention was focused on the man beside me, this steady presence who'd been protecting me from the truth for years. We sat on a bench overlooking a small pond, and Robert finally spoke. "I wanted to tell you from the beginning. The day David brought you home to meet us, when it was clear he was serious about you, I pulled him aside and told him he needed to be honest about Sophie, about Lisa, about all of it. But he refused. He said it was ancient history, that it would only complicate things. And when I pressed him on it, he said if I told you, he'd never forgive me, that he'd cut all contact with us." Robert's hands were clenched in his lap. "I should have told you anyway. I've regretted that decision every day for 5 years. You were trying to protect your relationship with your son. I was being a coward." His voice was harsh, with self-recrimination. "I was prioritizing David's feelings over your right to know the truth. And look where it got us." I studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way the afternoon light brought out the silver in his hair. "You've been carrying this guilt all this time." Among other things. There was something in his tone that made me look at him more closely. "What other things?" He turned to face me then, and the intensity in his eyes made my heart skip. "Janelle, there's something else I need to tell you. Something I should have said a long time ago, but couldn't because of the situation with David." The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with the same electricity I'd felt on the porch that night. But this time, there was no Claire calling from inside to break the moment. "What is it?" "I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air between us, impossible to take back. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process what he'd just said. "Robert, I know how that sounds. I know how wrong it is. You were my son's wife, and now you're going through a divorce, and this is the last thing you need to hear right now." His words were coming faster now, as if he'd been holding them back for so long that they were pouring out of him. "But I can't pretend anymore. I can't sit across from you at dinner every night and pretend I don't feel what I feel." "How long?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Since the beginning. Since that first Sunday dinner, when David brought you home. You were wearing a blue dress and you laughed at something Claire said, and I thought..." He shook his head. "I thought David was the luckiest man alive." The memory came flooding back, that blue sundress I'd agonized over choosing, wanting to make a good impression on David's parents. I remembered Robert being quieter than usual that day, more reserved, and I'd worried that he didn't like me. "That's why you were so distant at first. I was trying to do the right thing. You were with David, you were happy, and I had no right to complicate that." His voice was rough with emotion. "But watching him treat you the way he did these past few years, watching him take you for granted, and then throw it all away, it's been killing me." I thought about all those moments over the years when I'd felt a connection with Robert, all those times I'd caught him looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. The way he'd always been the first to offer help when something needed fixing, the way he remembered little details about my preferences, the way he said my name like it meant something important. "The night on the porch," I said slowly, "when you said I wasn't alone, I meant it. Whatever happens, wherever this goes, I want you to know that you have someone in your corner. Someone who sees your worth, who knows what David gave up when he walked away." The sincerity in his voice broke something open inside me. For months, I'd been questioning everything about myself, wondering what I'd done wrong, what I lacked that had driven David to look elsewhere. But Robert was looking at me like I was precious, like I was worth fighting for. "This is crazy," I said, but there was no conviction in my voice. "I know. Believe me, I know. I've been telling myself that for 5 years. What are we supposed to do? You're David's father. I'm still technically married to your son." "I don't know," he admitted. "I just know I couldn't keep pretending anymore. Not after today, not after you learn the truth about David. You deserve to know that someone sees you, really sees you, and values what they see." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his confession settling between us. Everything had changed in the span of a few hours. My understanding of my marriage, my future, and now this revelation that recontextualized years of interactions. "Robert, I need time to think about this." "Of course. I'm not asking for an answer, or for anything to change right now. I just needed you to know." But something had already changed. The careful distance I'd maintained with Robert, the proper boundaries of a daughter-in-law relationship, had been obliterated by his words. And if I was being honest with myself, part of me was relieved to finally understand the undercurrent that had always existed between us. We drove back to the house in comfortable silence, but I was acutely aware of his presence beside me in a way I'd never allowed myself to be before. The strength of his hands on the steering wheel, the calm authority in the way he navigated traffic, the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with sawdust from the construction site. Claire was in the garden when we arrived, tending to her roses with the focused attention she gave them every evening. She looked up as we approached, and I saw her take in our expressions, the subtle shift in the dynamic between Robert and me. "Everything all right?" she asked, but her tone suggested she already suspected the answer was complicated. "We talked," Robert said simply. Claire's eyes flicked between us, and I saw understanding dawn in her expression. "I see." "Claire," I started, but she held up a hand. "Honey, whatever's happening between you two, it's none of my business. You're both adults, and after what David put you through, you deserve whatever happiness you can find." The casual acceptance in her voice surprised me. "You're not shocked." "Shocked." Claire laughed, a sound tinged with sadness. "Honey, I've been watching Robert watch you for 5 years. I'd have to be blind not to see how he feels about you." "You knew." "A mother knows when her son is in love, even when he's trying to hide it." She turned back to her roses, giving us a moment of privacy. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling again, but this time my restlessness had a different quality. Instead of anxiety and dread, I felt a strange mixture of confusion and anticipation. Everything I'd thought I knew about my life had been turned upside down in a single day, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. David's betrayal still hurt, but it was a clean kind of pain now. I understood what had happened, why it had happened, and I could begin to move forward. The lies about Sophie and Lisa stung more than the affair in some ways. They spoke to a fundamental dishonesty that had undermined our entire relationship. But Robert's confession had shifted something deeper. It made me question everything I'd assumed about love, about compatibility, about what I really wanted in a partner. With David, everything had always been slightly out of sync. We'd loved each other, but we'd never quite clicked in the way I'd read about in books or seen in movies. I'd assumed that was just real life, that the effortless connection I'd imagined was a fantasy. But with Robert, conversation flowed naturally. We shared similar values, similar senses of humor, similar approaches to problems. Even before today, I'd found myself looking forward to our evening talks, to his steady presence in the chaos of my collapsed marriage. Was it possible that I'd been in love with the wrong brother all along? The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I must have finally fallen asleep, because I woke to the sound of voices downstairs, Claire and Robert talking in low, urgent tones. The clock on my nightstand read 2:17 a.m., and pale moonlight was streaming through the windows. I crept to the top of the stairs, trying to make out what they were saying. "Can't keep pretending this isn't happening," Robert was saying. I know, but think about what this means for the family. For David. David made his choices. He doesn't get to dictate how the rest of us live our lives. He's still your son. And she's still the best thing that ever happened to this family, even if he was too stupid to realize it. There was a long pause, then Claire's voice, softer now. You really love her, don't you? More than I've ever loved anyone. More than I thought possible. The raw honesty in his voice made my chest tight with emotion. I'd never heard David talk about me that way, with that kind of absolute certainty and devotion. What are you going to do? I don't know. Wait, I guess. Let her process everything that happened today. Hope that maybe when she's ready, she might be willing to see if this thing between us could be something real. And if David finds out? Robert's laugh was bitter. David's going to have bigger concerns than my love life. Wait until his pregnant girlfriend finds out about Sophie. Wait until Sophie finds out about the girlfriend. David's house of cards is about to come crashing down, and he's going to need all the support he can get. I crept back to my room, my mind spinning. Robert was right. David's carefully compartmentalized life was about to implode spectacularly. But more than that, I was struck by the maturity of Robert's approach to the situation. He wasn't trying to rush me or pressure me. He was simply being honest about his feelings and waiting to see how I chose to respond. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended kind of normalcy. I went about my daily routines, job searching, helping Claire with household tasks, trying to move forward with the divorce proceedings, but everything felt different. I was hyper-aware of Robert's presence, of the careful way we navigated around each other, of the loaded glances and meaningful silences. Claire, for her part, seemed determined to give us space to figure things out. She found reasons to run errands in the evenings, leaving Robert and me alone to talk. But we both seemed hesitant to address what had happened directly, as if speaking about it too soon might shatter something fragile and precious. Then, for days after Robert's confession, David called. I was in the kitchen making coffee when the phone rang. Claire answered, and I could tell from her tone who was on the other end. Hello, David. Yes, she's here. What do you mean? Problems? Oh, honey, no. The conversation went on for several minutes, Claire's responses growing increasingly concerned. When she finally hung up, her face was pale. What's wrong? I asked. Amanda found out about Sophie. David told her yesterday, and she didn't take it well. What does that mean? She's threatening to leave him. She says she can't trust someone who could hide something that big for so long. Claire's irony wasn't lost on me. And apparently, she's been doing some digging. She found out about Lisa, about the divorce, about all the things David never told her either. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sympathy. Amanda was learning what I'd learned, that David was capable of profound deception, of creating elaborate lies to avoid difficult conversations. What does he want? He's asking if he can come here. He says he needs somewhere to stay while he figures things out. The idea of David moving back into this house, into the space where Robert and I were carefully exploring whatever was growing between us, made my stomach clench. What did you tell him? That I needed to talk to Robert first. And to you. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Robert walked through the back door, still in his work clothes and carrying his lunch cooler. He took one look at our faces and stopped short. What happened? Claire filled him in on David's call, and I watched Robert's expression grow stonier with each detail. Absolutely not, he said when she finished. Robert, he's our son. He's a grown man who made his choices. He doesn't get to come running home every time those choices have consequences. Where else is he supposed to go? A hotel, an apartment, Amanda's place, if she'll have him. Robert set his lunch cooler on the counter with more force than necessary. But not here. Not while Janelle is here. Maybe I should be the one to leave, I said quietly. Both Robert and Claire turned to look at me with identical expressions of horror. Absolutely not, Robert said again, his voice firm. This is your home now, for as long as you want it to be. David doesn't get to displace you again. The protectiveness in his voice made my heart race. He was choosing me over his son, prioritizing my comfort and security over family loyalty. It was a gesture that spoke volumes about where his heart truly lay. What am I supposed to tell him? Claire asked, looking torn between her loyalty to David and her support for Robert's decision. Tell him the truth, Robert said. Tell him that actions have consequences and he needs to figure out how to live with his. Claire made the call while Robert and I sat at the kitchen table, listening to her gentle but firm explanation of why David couldn't come home. I could hear his voice through the phone, growing louder and more agitated as the conversation progressed. I understand you're upset, honey, but this isn't just about you anymore, Claire was saying. Janelle is part of this family too, and she needs stability right now, not more chaos. When she finally hung up, she looked exhausted. He's not happy. He'll survive, Robert said curtly. What about Sophie? Has he told her about any of this? That's part of the problem. Lisa found out about Amanda through some social media post, and now she's threatening to restrict David's visitation rights. She says she can't trust him around Sophie if he's going to keep lying about his relationships. The domino effect of David's deceptions was spectacular to watch, even from a distance. Every lie he'd told was connecting to every other lie, creating a web of consequences that was tightening around him. He's losing everything, I said, and despite everything he'd done to me, I felt a flicker of sympathy. He lost everything the day he decided to cheat on you, Robert replied. Everything else is just the universe catching up. That evening, Robert found me on the back porch again, the same spot where everything had started to shift between us. This time, he brought a bottle of wine and 2 glasses without asking. Thought you might need this after today, he said, settling into the chair beside me. It's been a day. I accepted the wine gratefully. How are you handling all this? I know he's your son, despite everything. Robert was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the darkening sky. I love David. I always will. But I don't like the man he's become. The lying, the cheating, the way he's treated you, that's not how I raised him. People make their own choices. They do. And David's made his. He turned to look at me, his eyes serious in the dim light. The question is, what choices are we going to make? The weight of his question settled between us. We'd been dancing around the elephant in the room for days, but now it was time to address it directly. Robert, this thing between us, it's not just about rebound emotions, is it? It's not just about me being vulnerable and you being there? Is that what you think it is? I considered his question carefully. I don't know. Everything happened so fast. One day I was married to your son, and now I'm sitting here having feelings for you that I don't know how to categorize. What kind of feelings? The directness of his question caught me off guard. But if we were going to do this, we needed to be honest about it. When I'm with you, I feel settled. Like I can breathe properly for the first time in years. When you look at me, I feel seen in a way I never did with David. I paused, gathering courage. And when you told me you loved me, it didn't feel shocking. It felt like something I'd been waiting to hear without realizing it. Robert set down his wine glass and turned to face me fully. Janelle, I want you to know that whatever happens between us, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to suddenly decide this is too complicated and run away. I'm not going to compartmentalize you into some secret part of my life. The implicit contrast to David was clear, and it made my chest tighten with emotion. What about Claire? What about the family dynamics? This is going to complicate everything. Claire's already given us her blessing. As for the rest of the family, we'll figure it out as we go. He reached over and took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. I've spent 5 years being careful, being appropriate, keeping my distance. I don't want to be careful anymore. The touch of his hand sent electricity up my arm. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt more intimate than anything I'd shared with David in months before he left. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to see where this goes. I want to take you on proper dates, not just stolen conversations on the back porch. I want to hold your hand in public and not worry about what people will think. I want to build something real with you, if you'll let me. The future he was describing sounded wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. But as I looked at him, at the steady certainty in his eyes, I realized I wanted it too. Yes, I said simply. Yes. Yes, I want to see where this goes too. He smiled then, a full, radiant smile that transformed his entire face. And when he leaned over to kiss me, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if we were both testing the waters of this new territory. But when I responded, when I let myself melt into him, it deepened into something that spoke of years of suppressed longing and newfound hope. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless and giddy and more alive than I'd felt in years. So, what happens now? I asked. Now we take it one day at a time. We figure out how to be together without hurting the people we care about. We build something good out of all this mess. It sounded perfect. It sounded like everything I'd been searching for without knowing it. 3 weeks later, I got the job offer I'd been hoping for. The marketing firm wanted me to start immediately, and the salary was enough to get me back on my feet financially. More importantly, it was a fresh start, a chance to build a life that was entirely my own. I was celebrating with Claire and Robert over dinner when my phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen, and we all froze. Answer it, Robert said. It's time to face whatever this is. I picked up the phone. Hello, David. Janelle, I need to talk to you. In person. I don't think that's a good idea. Please. There are things I need to say, things I need to explain. And there's something else, something about the divorce papers. My stomach dropped. What about them? Just, can we meet? Tomorrow? There's a coffee shop on 5th Street. David, whatever you need to say, you can say it now. I can't do this over the phone. His voice was strained, desperate. Please, Janelle. One conversation. That's all I'm asking. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him. Robert wasn't happy about it, but he understood that I needed closure, needed to face this final chapter of my marriage before I could fully move forward. The coffee shop was neutral territory, public enough to feel safe, but private enough for difficult conversations. David was already there when I arrived, looking haggard and older than his 34 years. The confident, charming man I'd married was gone, replaced by someone who looked defeated and desperate. Thank you for coming, he said as I sat down across from him. You said there was something about the divorce papers? There is. But first, I need you to know how sorry I am. About everything. About Sophie, about the affair, about the lies. I know it doesn't change anything, but I needed to say it. You're right. It doesn't change anything. He flinched at my cold tone, but pressed on. I've lost everything, Janelle. Amanda left me. Lisa's restricting my access to Sophie. I don't have a job anymore. Amanda made sure I was fired when she found out about the lies. I'm living in a motel room, and I can't even afford that much longer. I'm sorry to hear that, but I don't know what you want me to do about it. I want you to take me back. The words hung in the air between us like a bomb waiting to explode. I stared at him, wondering if I'd heard correctly. Excuse me? I know how it sounds. I know what I did was unforgivable. But we had something good once, didn't we? We could have it again. I could make it up to you. David, are you insane? I'm desperate, he said, leaning forward. I've realized what I threw away. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I was too stupid to see it. You're only saying that because everyone else has left you. No, that's not true. I've been thinking about us, about what we had, and I realize now that I sabotaged it because I was scared. Scared of being truly honest with someone, scared of being vulnerable. So, you're saying the affair was actually my fault for not making you feel safe enough to be honest? That's not what I mean. That's exactly what you mean. You're trying to rewrite history to make yourself the victim here. David's desperation was palpable, but it only made me angrier. He was exactly the same as he'd always been, self-centered, manipulative, unwilling to take real responsibility for his actions. What about the divorce papers? I asked, wanting to end this conversation as quickly as possible. I haven't signed them. My blood went cold. What do you mean you haven't signed them? I've been stalling, hoping we could work things out. But if you really want to go through with this, I'll sign them. I just need one thing in return. This isn't a negotiation, David. I need money. Enough to get back on my feet, to get an apartment, to start over. The house is worth more now than when we bought it. If we sell it, there should be enough for both of us to move on. We've already been through this. I can't afford to buy you out, but I can't afford to lose the house either. It's the only stability I have left. Not anymore. He leaned back, and I saw a glimmer of the old David, the one who always had an angle. You've got a new job now. You're living rent-free with my parents. You're doing better than me. How do you know about my job? Claire told me when I called yesterday. The betrayal was like a slap. Claire had been giving David information about my life. Information he could use against me. What exactly are you proposing? Sell the house. Split the proceeds. I'll sign the divorce papers as soon as the sale goes through. And if I refuse, then I'll contest the divorce. I'll drag it out for as long as possible. Make it expensive for both of us. The threat was clear, and it made me sick. This was extortion, plain and simple. You're despicable. I'm desperate. There's a difference. I stood up, unable to sit in his presence for another second. I'll think about it. Janelle, wait. But I was already walking away, my hands shaking with rage and adrenaline. When I got back to the house, I found Robert in his workshop, sanding a piece of wood with methodical precision. He looked up when I entered, and his expression immediately shifted to concern. That bad. I told him everything. David's pathetic apology, his delusional suggestion that we get back together, and most importantly, his threat to contest the divorce unless I agreed to sell the house. By the time I finished, Robert's hands were clenched into fists, and the piece of wood he'd been working on was forgotten. He's trying to extort you. That's what it feels like. We won't let him do this to you. How are we going to stop him? He's right about the legal system. If he wants to drag this out, he can. And I can't afford a prolonged legal battle. Robert was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he considered the problem. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but determined. There's something David doesn't know. What? The house isn't just in your names. When you two bought it, you needed a co-signer for the mortgage because your credit wasn't established enough. Do you remember who co-signed? I thought back to the closing, trying to remember the details. It had been such a whirlwind of paperwork and excitement that many of the specifics were blurry. It was you, wasn't it? It was me. Which means I have legal standing in any decision about the sale. David can't force you to sell without my agreement. Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by gratitude. Robert had been protecting me even before I'd realized I needed protection. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I was hoping it wouldn't come to this. I was hoping David would do the right thing for once in his life. So what happens now? Now we call his bluff. I'll have my lawyer draft a letter explaining the situation and making it clear that any attempt to contest the divorce will be met with full legal resistance. David's broke and desperate. He can't afford a legal battle any more than you can. That night, as I lay in bed processing everything that had happened, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the man sleeping down the hall. Robert had been my protector, my advocate, my steady presence through the worst period of my life. And now he was something more. He was my partner, my future, my chance at real happiness. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Claire answered, as she always did, and I could tell from her shocked expression that something significant was happening. What do you mean arrested? She was saying. For what? Oh my God. Yes, we'll be right there. She hung up and turned to Robert and me with a pale face. That was David's lawyer. David's been arrested for embezzlement. Apparently, he's been stealing money from his company accounts for months, and Amanda reported it when she found out about the affair. The room fell silent as we processed this information. How much money? Robert asked quietly. Enough to make it a felony. He's looking at serious jail time. I felt a strange mixture of shock and inevitability. David's house of cards hadn't just collapsed, it had exploded. What does this mean for the divorce? I asked. I don't know, but I think we need to call a lawyer. As it turned out, David's arrest simplified things considerably. With criminal charges pending, he was in no position to contest the divorce or make demands about the house. His lawyer advised him to sign the papers quickly and quietly, hoping to avoid additional complications. 2 weeks later, I was officially divorced. The house was mine, free and clear, and I was starting my new job the following Monday. For the first time in months, the future looked bright. That evening, Robert and I took a walk through the neighborhood, our hands intertwined, talking about everything and nothing. We were no longer hiding our relationship, no longer pretending that the connection between us was anything other than what it was: love, pure and simple. "I have something for you," Robert said as we approached the house. "What kind of something?" Instead of answering, he led me to the back porch and retrieved a small wrapped box from behind one of the planters. My heart stopped. "Robert, what is this?" "Open it." Inside was a ring. Not an engagement ring, but a simple, elegant band with a small diamond. It was beautiful and understated and completely perfect. "It's a promise ring," he said, his voice gentle. "I know we can't get married right away. I know there are still complications to work through, still time you need to heal from everything David put you through. But I want you to know that I'm serious about us, about our future." I looked at the ring, then at him, and felt my heart overflow with emotion. "Robert, I love you." It was the first time I'd said the words out loud, and they felt as natural as breathing. "I love you too," he replied, slipping the ring onto my finger. "And I promise you, whatever happens, whatever complications arise, I'm not going anywhere." We sat on the porch swing, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars come out. Everything felt perfect, settled, like we'd found our way home after years of being lost. But as I was drifting off to sleep that night, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. There's something about Robert you don't know. Something that will change everything. Meet me tomorrow at the park on Elm Street. Come alone. A friend." I stared at the message, my blood running cold. Just when I thought the secrets and revelations were over, just when I thought I'd found solid ground, someone was suggesting that there was another bombshell waiting to drop. I looked at the ring on my finger, then at the closed door of Robert's room down the hall. What could this mysterious person possibly know about Robert that would change everything? And why were they contacting me now, just when I'd finally found happiness? As I lay there in the darkness, one terrible thought kept circling through my mind. What if the man I'd fallen in love with was hiding secrets just as devastating as David's had been? What if I was about to discover that I'd simply traded one set of lies for another? The ring on my finger suddenly felt heavy, like a weight rather than a promise. And as sleep finally claimed me, I couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would bring answers I wasn't prepared to hear.